There are moments in life when your body knows the truth long before your mind is willing to admit it. A room can look safe, a person can smile kindly, a situation can appear perfect on paper, and yet something inside you quietly tightens. Your chest becomes heavy, your stomach hardens, your breathing changes, and you tell yourself, I'm overthinking, but you are not overthinking. You are feeling, and feeling is often the first language of truth. Most people have been trained to distrust that language. From childhood, many of us learned to explain away our discomfort instead of listening to it. We were praised for being reasonable, obedient, accommodating, polite. We learned to silence the signals coming from within because they made other people uncomfortable. So when the body whispered, something is wrong, the mind answered, don't be dramatic. That is how disconnection begins. The tragedy is not that people lose their intuition. The tragedy is that they are taught to abandon it in order to survive. A child enters a room and instantly senses tension between the parents even when nobody says a word. The body knows. The nervous system knows. A child can feel rejection behind a smile, anger behind silence, sadness behind fake laughter. Human beings are born deeply intuitive before the world teaches them to doubt themselves. And what we call intuition is often the body carrying truths the conscious mind has not yet processed, because the mind wants certainty. The body wants safety. The mind analyzes words. The body reads energy. You can lie with language. You cannot lie with presence. Some of the greatest pain people experience comes from staying in places their body begged them to leave. Relationships that looked right from the outside. Jobs that sounded successful. Friendships built on silent exhaustion. Environments where their spirit slowly disappeared. The body knew. It always knew. But many people override themselves because they fear disappointing others more than they fear betraying themselves. And betrayal of the self is the deepest wound a human being can carry. There is a reason anxiety rises when you continuously ignore your inner signals. There is a reason exhaustion appears when you force yourself to live against your own truth. There is a reason depression often carries the feeling of being disconnected from yourself. The body is not attacked. NGU. The body is speaking to you. Symptoms are not always signs of weakness. Sometimes they are messages. Sometimes they are alarms. Sometimes they are grief with nowhere else to go. People often ask, why didn't I see the truth sooner? But the real question is, how long did I feel it before I allowed myself to admit it? Because intuition rarely screams at first. It whispers. It is the pause before saying yes, the tension before entering a room, the exhaustion after spending time with certain people, the sudden calm around someone genuine, the strange heaviness that arrives without explanation. Your body responds to truth before your mind creates a story about it. That is why some people feel instantly safe, not because they are perfect, but because your nervous system does not have to defend itself around them. And some people drain you even when they say all the right things, because the body can detect what words attempt to hide. We live in a world that worships intellect and dismisses instinct. People are taught to gather evidence for what they already feel deep inside. But intuition is not irrational. It is accumulated human wisdom moving beneath conscious awareness. Our body is gathering information every second. Tone of voice, facial expression, emotional inconsistency, manipulation, authenticity, fear, warmth, danger, love. Long before the mind forms conclusions, the body has already begun responding. And many sensitive people suffer because they were conditioned to believe their sensitivity was weakness. But sensitivity is not fragility. Sensitivity is awareness. The most intuitive people often spent years learning how to read emotional environments because they had to. They became experts at detecting shifts in energy, mood, danger, rejection, unpredictability. Not because they were broken, but because survival demanded awareness. So when they walk into a room and instantly feel something is off, they are not imagining things. Their nervous system has been listening their entire life. The problem is that society rewards disconnection. People are praised for tolerating what hurts them, for staying silent, for pushing through exhaustion, for ignoring emotional pain, for abandoning themselves in the name of achievement, loyalty, or love. And eventually, they no longer recognize the voice within them. They become strangers to their own intuition. You can see it in the way people constantly seek external permission. Am I wrong for feeling this? Am I being too sensitive? Do you think this is a bad sign? Because somewhere along the way, they learned other people's opinions mattered more than their own inner knowing. But healing begins the moment a person pauses long enough to listen inward again, not to fear, not to paranoia, but to the quiet intelligence living inside the body. The body does not speak in paragraphs. It speaks in sensations: expansion, contraction, warmth, tension, relief, numbness, tightness, ease. And the more disconnected people become from themselves, the louder the body often needs to speak. At first, it is discomfort, then anxiety, then exhaustion, then emotional collapse, not because the body is your enemy, but because it refuses to let you live disconnected forever without consequence. There is wisdom in paying attention to what your body feels after certain conversations. There is wisdom in noticing who brings peace into your life and who brings confusion. There is wisdom in recognizing when your smile disappears around certain people. Intuition is not magic. It is the human organism responding honestly before social conditioning interferes. And the painful truth is this: many people would rather question themselves endlessly than face the reality their intuition is trying to reveal. Because truth changes things. Truth demands courage. Truth may require leaving what is familiar. Truth may disappoint people. Truth may force you to grieve the life you imagined. So the mind negotiates, but the body remembers. The body keeps score of every moment you abandon yourself to keep peace, every forced yes, every silenced number, every smile hiding pain, every relationship your intuition warned you about. And one day people wake up exhausted without understanding why. It is exhausting to fight yourself every day. Real power begins when a person stops arguing with their own inner experience, when they can finally say, "This feeling matters, this tension means something, my body is trying to protect me, not punish me," because intuition is not there to make you fearful, it is there to make you honest. And honesty is terrifying for people who spent their whole lives surviving through denial. The most dangerous thing a person can lose is not money, status, relationships, or success. It is the connection to themselves. Because once you begin abandoning your own truth, you start living a life that may look acceptable from the outside while slowly destroying you from within. Inner conflict begins the moment you feel one thing deeply, but force yourself to perform another. You say yes while your entire body is screaming no. You smile while carrying silent resentment. You stay loyal to people who continuously betray your spirit. You remain in environments that suffocate your soul because leaving feels more frightening than suffering. And over time, something inside you begins to fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. A slow separation between who you truly are and who you became in order to survive. Most people do not wake up one morning and decide to betray themselves. They learn it gradually. A child expresses pain and is told, "You're too sensitive." A teenager speaks truth and is punished for it. A person sets a boundary and is made to feel selfish. Someone cries and is called weak, so they adapt. They stop listening to themselves because acceptance becomes more important than authenticity. And this is how inner conflict is born. The human being was never designed to live divided against themselves. You cannot continuously silence your instincts, suppress your emotions, ignore your needs, betray your boundaries, and expect inner peace to remain intact. The soul does not thrive in self-abandonment. There are people walking through life appearing functional while internally collapsing every single day, not because life defeated them, but because they have spent years fighting against their own inner truth. The body feels exhaustion, the heart feels grief, the nervous system feels confusion. Because deep inside they know they are living disconnected from themselves. One of the deepest forms of suffering is pretending. Pretending to be okay when you are hurting. Pretending to love what drains you. Pretending not to care when your heart is breaking. Pretending to feel safe around people your body fears. Pretending your boundaries do not matter. The human spirit can survive pain. What destroys people is prolonged self-betrayal. Because every time you ignore yourself, a message is sent inward. My feelings do not matter. My needs are inconvenient. My truth is unsafe. And eventually people stop trusting themselves completely. That is why so many individuals become trapped in cycles of anxiety, confusion, and emotional paralysis. They no longer know what they genuinely feel because they have spent years prioritizing external approval over internal truth. They know how to please everyone except themselves. There is an enormous psychological cost to constantly being who others need you to be. Some people become caretakers because they learned love must be earned through sacrifice. Some become perfectionists because mistakes once threatened their sense of safety. Some become emotionally numb because feeling deeply overwhelmed them. Some become people pleasers because rejection feels unbearable. But beneath all these patterns is the same wound. The fear that being fully yourself may cost you love, belonging, or survival. So people split themselves apart. One version becomes acceptable to the world, the other remains hidden in silence, and hidden pain does not disappear. It transforms. It becomes anxiety, burnout, depression, emotional emptiness, chronic tension, irritability, loneliness in crowded rooms. Because no amount of external validation can heal the pain of abandoning yourself. You can achieve success and still feel empty. You can stay in relationships and still feel alone. You can smile publicly while privately feeling disconnected from your own life. The conflict is not always between you and other people. Often the conflict is between the truth inside you and the role you keep performing. And the exhausting part is that the body remembers everything the mind tries to minimize. The body remembers every forced conversation, every swallowed emotion, every boundary violated to keep peace, every moment you ignored your own discomfort, every time your intuition begged you to walk away but fear convinced you to stay. Human beings are not machines. You cannot continuously override your inner reality without consequences. At some point, the soul begins demanding honesty. That is why people often experience emotional breakdowns after years of appearing strong. Because strength built on self-denial eventually collapses. Many people think inner conflict comes from weakness. It does not. It comes from living too far away from yourself for too long. You can feel it when someone laughs but their eyes look exhausted. When someone says, "I'm fine," while their energy feels shattered. Mioni spends their life taking care of others while completely neglecting their own emotional starvation. The tragedy is that many people become so accustomed to self-abandonment that it starts feeling normal. They no longer ask themselves, "What do I feel? What do I need? What feels true to me?" Instead, they ask, "What will upset people less? What will keep everyone comfortable? What will make me accepted?" And slowly they disappear from their own lives. There is no greater loneliness than losing connection with yourself. Because once that connection breaks, people search everywhere else for peace, in relationships, in achievements, in distractions, in validation, in endless productivity. But peace cannot be found while continuously abandoning your own truth. The human nervous system longs for congruence, for alignment, for honesty between what is felt internally and what is expressed externally. When those two realities are separated for too long, suffering emerges. This is why saying no can feel terrifying for people who spent their lives surviving through pleasing others, because boundaries threaten the identity they created to remain loved. But every healthy boundary as an act of ending inner war. Every honest moment is a return to yourself. Every time you choose authenticity over performance, something inside you begins breathing again. Healing is not becoming someone new. Healing is recovering the self you were forced to abandon, the self that knew when something felt wrong, the self that felt emotions honestly, the self that did not apologize for existing, the self that trusted its instincts before fear took over. Many people spend years trying to silence their pain without realizing the pain is asking for truth, not perfection. Truth, because the body can tolerate hardship. What it struggles to survive is contradiction, saying yes while feeling no, remaining silent while carrying rage, staying connected to people who repeatedly wound you, living a life that looks successful but feels emotionally dead. This is the hidden violence many people commit against themselves every day. And the frightening part is that society often rewards it. People are praised for endurance while quietly dying inside, praised for sacrifice while emotionally collapsing, praised for being easygoing while carrying unbearable resentment. But eventually the truth surfaces. It always does, because the self you abandon never truly disappears. It waits in anxiety, in exhaustion, in loneliness, in the quiet ache you feel when your life no longer feels like your own. And the moment a person finally stops running from themselves, the healing begins. There are people in this world who walk into a room and immediately feel everything. They feel tension hidden behind smiles, sadness behind confidence, fear beneath anger, distance beneath polite words. And because they feel so deeply, they spend much of their lives believing something is wrong with them. They are told they think too much, feel too much, care too much, react too much. So they begin apologizing for the very gift that was trying to protect them. Sensitivity has been misunderstood for generations. People confuse sensitivity with fragility because they do not understand the strength it takes to remain emotionally awake in a world that survives through numbness. It is not weakness to feel deeply. Weakness is losing connection with your humanity and calling it strength. Sensitive people notice what others ignore. They hear pain hidden inside casual conversations. They notice when someone's energy changes. They feel the emotional atmosphere of a place before a single word is spoken. They recognize exhaustion in people pretending to be fine. This is not overreaction. This is awareness. But awareness becomes painful in a society that rewards emotional disconnection. The world often teaches people to suppress empathy in order to function, to ignore suffering because it is inconvenient, to silence intuition because it is uncomfortable, to avoid vulnerability because it appears weak. Sensitive people struggle not because they are broken, but because they feel realities other people spend their lives trying to escape. And many sensitive individuals were shaped by environments where they had to become emotionally alert very early in life. A child growing up in unpredictability learns to read moods instantly. A child surrounded by emotional instability becomes highly aware of tone, silence, tension, and subtle shifts in behavior. Not because they are dramatic, because survival trained them to pay attention. So later in life, they continue sensing everything. They notice the sadness someone hides behind humor, the manipulation beneath charm, the loneliness beneath success, the anger beneath politeness, and often they carry shame for seeing too much. Sensitive people are frequently made to feel defective because their nervous systems refuse to normalize what is emotionally unhealthy. They cannot comfortably remain in environments filled with dishonesty, cruelty, emotional coldness, or constant disconnection. Their bodies react. Their hearts react. Their energy reacts, not because they are weak, because they are awake. There is a profound loneliness that comes from perceiving things deeply in a world committed to superficiality. Sensitive people often feel isolated because others dismiss what they intuitively recognize. They hear, "You're imagining things, you take everything personally, you're too emotional, you need tougher skin." But what if sensitivity is not the problem? What if numbness has simply become normalized? What if many people have become so disconnected from themselves that genuine emotional awareness now appears abnormal? The sensitive person often becomes the emotional mirror in relationships. They feel what others suppress. They carry what others deny. They speak truths others avoid. And because of this, they are often misunderstood. People admire empathy until it reveals uncomfortable truths. The sensitive person notices when love becomes conditional, when kindness becomes manipulation, when connection becomes performance, when someone says the right words but carries the wrong energy. And this level of awareness can become exhausting when a person has not learned how to protect themselves. Many sensitive individuals spend years absorbing the pain of everyone around them. They become caretakers, listeners, healers, or rescuers, not because they are naturally responsible for everyone, but because they feel emotional suffering intensely. The danger is that they begin confusing self-sacrifice with love. They give until they collapse, stay until they break, forgive until they disappear, carry burdens that were never theirs, and eventually they become emotionally drained without understanding why. Sensitivity without boundaries becomes suffering. Because awareness is a gift, but carrying the emotional weight of the entire world is not your purpose. The deepest misunderstanding about sensitive people is that others assume softness means weakness. But sensitive people survive things that emotionally disconnected. People often cannot endure. To remain compassionate after experiencing pain is strength. To remain emotionally open after betrayal is strength. To continue feeling deeply in a world that constantly wounds you is strength. Numbness is not strength. Avoidance is not strength. Emotional shutdown is not strength. True strength is staying connected to your humanity without allowing the world to harden your heart completely. Sensitive people often battle themselves because they were taught their natural awareness was excessive. So they try to become less emotional, less caring, less intuitive, less affected. But every attempt to disconnect from sensitivity creates disconnection from the self. Because sensitivity is not something separate from who they are. It is how they experience life. It is why music moves them deeply, why certain conversations stay in their heart for years, why they feel emotionally exhausted in toxic environments, why beauty affects them intensely, why cruelty disturbs them profoundly. Sensitive people do not simply observe life, they absorb it. And yes, this can create pain, but it also creates extraordinary depth. These are often the people who create art that heart, LS others, who listen without judgment, who make others feel seen, who recognize suffering before anyone asks for help, who notice the child hiding inside wounded adults. Their awareness allows them to connect with the human experience in ways many people never fully understand. The problem is not sensitivity itself. The problem is living in a world that constantly tells sensitive people to betray their nature in order to fit in. So they silence themselves, minimize themselves, harden themselves artificially, and eventually they feel disconnected from their own spirit. But healing begins when a sensitive person realizes they do not need to become colder to survive. They need boundaries, discernment, self-respect, safe environments, emotionally healthy relationships. Sensitivity becomes powerful when it is no longer mixed with self-abandonment, because awareness without self-worth leads to suffering, but awareness with self-respect becomes wisdom. The sensitive person begins recognizing, not every emotion belongs to me. Not every wounded person is mine to save. Not every relationship deserves access to my energy. Not every environment deserves my presence. And this realization changes, ease everything. For the first time, sensitivity stops feeling like punishment and begins feeling like guidance. The ability to sense deeply becomes clarity, protection, discernment, human connection. The world desperately needs people who still feel, people who still notice, people who still care when others are hurting, people who refuse to normalize emotional emptiness. Because the emotionally awake person reminds others what it means to be human. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that sensitive people feel too much. It is that the world has convinced so many people to feel far too little.